Yes, where were we? We were nowhere. आप लोग घर जाकर रिवाइज करते हैं कि नहीं? Do you revise? So how are you not aware where were we? This is the second class. So I know that in human psychology there is something called as forgetfulness curve. We tend to forget, but not so early. You are still in the early phase of your preparation. Yes, we had started with the commercial revolution. है ना, यही शुरू किया था ना? This class number 2. And in the commercial revolution, I think, did we start with the factors? Did we do crusades? And I explained why the Abrahamic religions are at conflict for long till today. 2 days back, a very interesting article on Iran-Israel dispute had come and the historicity of it. Did you read? From the time when the Assyrian king had attacked and destroyed the first temple till today. Padha tha? So develop this habit of saving important articles or writing something from that, at least for the first 6 months. Why? Because later on it will not become very much possible for you. But initially if you do, that would serve as a very good, I would say, opinion based reservoir which will reflect in your mains examination. Fine. So we were doing the factors responsible for the commercial revolution, and I did tell you that how Europe, which was so backward, which was so I would say in a very decadent state during the dark ages, was reviving, and the most important factor was the growth and also the expansion of trade and commerce. In that there were many factors. Now we know that due to crusades, which was a religious war, there was revival of trade along the Mediterranean route. Fine. Now there was another route that we know is the Silk route, that is the land route connecting China, and there was a time when India was also linked with the Silk route. Especially you read in your ancient India, when the Kushans were ruling in India, that time a Silk route, a branch of the Silk route diverted towards India, and then from India the silk used to go via the sea route from the ports of Gujarat. That is when the Kushans made a lot of money. But suddenly the Silk route by 600 AD or by 6th-7th century had declined. Why did the Silk route decline? Byzantines learned the art of sericulture by stealing silkworms. Is that the only factor because of which the route declined? What are the other factors? Rise of hostile tribes such as Huns and others in Central Asia, which made it difficult for the traders and merchants to go along that route. You read about the Huns in the factors responsible for the fall of Gupta Empire. Now in 13th century came a Mongol king, Genghis Khan. And Genghis Khan was able to bring under his control the entire land from Mongolia to the Caspian Sea. He had defeated. You read that Genghis Khan would have come to India had it not been for the diplomatic smart move of Iltutmish. So Genghis Khan not only brought about stability, political order in Central Asia, but he later revived the Silk route also. So the Silk route will also revive from 13th century because of Genghis Khan. And then we read that there was an Italian traveler who, because everybody wanted to know about China, or the Europeans wanted to explore more and more about the Oriental world. So Genghis Khan, when he stabilized it, then a number of Italian travelers, Spanish travelers, they started traversing along. We read in ancient and medieval India the arrival of foreign travelers. So one of them traversed all the way and stayed in China, documented his observations in China, then returned via the sea route to India, via Southeast Asia. In fact, he stayed in India also, in Andhra Pradesh at that time. The Kakatiya kingdom was there, and the famous queen regent Rudrama Devi was there. So he talks about the situation of India also, and then that person via the sea route returns to Europe, to Italy, and when the Europeans read his diary, they realized that China has much more to offer rather than only silk. Probably silk began to be to be cultivated and made in Eastern Europe, but China had much more to offer, and that is why again the trade with China started, this time not in silk but in commodities such as gunpowder. Gunpowder, the arrival of gunpowder was going to change the mechanics of warfare all over the world. In fact, one of the factors responsible for the fall of feudalism was arrival of gunpowder, because the kings were the ones to understand the potential of gunpowder. You read that in India also gunpowder had arrived much before the arrival of Babur, maybe not to that extensive scale. How? Because of Marco Polo. We have references that during the Delhi Sultanate, people used to or were aware of atishbazi, firecrackers. Some of the Rajput kings used to use gunpowder in their mines. Another thing that was in huge demand and came from China was paper. Now, paper would play a very important role in knowledge revolution. Later, the invention of printing press and paper would bring about a knowledge revolution that we will study in the form of Renaissance. And another thing, a number of commodities were coming, tea, chai. And then the sea explorers found something to their advantage, that is the mariner compass. So all these things came from where? From China. And again the Silk Route, which had declined or which had dried up, revived. So this is another factor. Discovery of silver mines in parts of Eastern Europe during 11th to 13th century was also responsible for the rapid growth of currency-based trade economy. So we are seeing that there are a number of factors due to which trade and commerce, which had started from 11th century, started growing. Everything was happening fine until 14th century. 14th century was a setback, I would say a temporary setback. 14th century is called as the century of crisis. When a number of problems suddenly Europe started facing, one of the problem was Black Death, a bubonic plague, 1347 to 1357, a plague which with its origin in Kyrgyzstan somehow arrived in Italy, and Italy was the hub of trade and commerce. And from Italy it rapidly spread to different parts of Europe. Why? Because this was an era of trade and commerce, this was an era of interpersonal contact. And because of this Black Death, it is called as Black Death because the people who contracted the disease used to develop black spots in their body, would cough blood and die. 30 to 50% of the population was wiped out within 4-5 years. And most of the people who died, they were poor. Why? Because they used to stay in densely populated areas. Whenever any I would say contaminated or any such disease happens, then people in the densely populated areas are always affected more. So because of which the population suddenly declined, and this decline was more perceptible in terms of working class. So feudalism, which was already on a decline, suddenly faced a crisis, that is labor crisis. In Europe, the traders suddenly found that the supply is there but the demand has fallen. So this also adversely affected trade and commerce. And the silver mines which were discovered between 11th to 13th century were by now exhausted. There was more demand, supply was less. And because of the extensive cultivation of land due to the demanding food from 11th century, we had seen because of improving climatic condition, the soil fertility had also stagnated. So everything was going well, but then in 13th century, 14th century, some problems emerged. Another problem that we read is the advent of mini ice age. Means suddenly the average temperature in northern Europe had fallen, because of which agricultural yield fell, and that is why in northern Europe, in countries like Netherlands, there was need for grain based trade. So they also started importing grains from the oriental world. फिर भी ठीक चल रहा था. But at the meanwhile, a new empire was emerging in the east, and that empire was Ottoman Empire. अब पर तो एक नया empire बनता है. And that Ottoman Empire was rapidly expanding, and in 1453 the Ottoman Empire were able to defeat the Byzantines, capture their capital Constantinople. This event is called as Fall of Constantinople, 1453 AD. And not only they captured Constantinople, but all the land which belonged to the Byzantines now fell to the Ottomans. That is, Eastern Europe fell under the Muslim rule. ये भी ठीक है. But the problem is that the Ottomans now, they started interfering in the trade. The Ottomans believed that the Christians are kafir and hence the kafir should not enter our holy land, so they blocked the land route to the east. They told the Europeans, we will not allow you to go to the east via our land. And not only that, in the Mediterranean and also in the Indian Ocean trade, where Arab and European traders were doing trade, they began to impose higher tariff and taxes on the Europeans, favoring the Arabs. So suddenly the Europeans found it difficult. These traders of Italy, Venice, Genoa, Milan, and a number of Spanish cities found it very difficult to do trade via the conventional route. The kings also were dependent on trade and commerce because the trade was a very important source of income for them, tax income. So they realized that we have to do something. So they began to explore new sea trade routes. So we see the beginning of sea explorations. In the sea explorations, two countries had played a very, very important role. They are Spain and Portugal. Why? Because the kings were personally interested. And other reason also why Spain and Portugal is at the forefront of sea exploration is because the Pope told the sea explorers that this is also an opportunity, a way for you to expand Christianity to different parts of the world. You read again in modern India, or otherwise also you should read that in Portugal there was a king who was fond of navigation. He was Henry the Navigator. तो फिर धीरे धीरे सब मिलने लगा. Somebody reached the tip of South Africa, that is called as Cape of Good Hope, Bartholomew Diaz. उसी रूट से थोड़ा आगे बढ़ करके Vasco da Gama reached here. Meanwhile, while all this is happening in the east, somebody accidentally landed in the west, Christopher Columbus, जिसको पता ही नहीं था. He thought that he has landed, he has discovered the shortest route to the east. उसको लगा that I have landed in East Indies. The islands east of India are called as East Indies. But actually he landed in Caribbean islands, है ना, West Indies, Bahamas. And he mistakenly, for years, the native people of that area were called as Red Indians. Red means black color, Indians इसीलिए. बाद में जाके 1510 में another merchant explorer whose name is Amerigo Vespucci अपनी किताब में लिखते हैं कि this is not East Indies, this is a new world that we have accidentally discovered. So North America, South America is the new world. That is the next thing. Did you understand? अब लिखिए. Second point or third point, whatever. In 13th century, the Mongol king stabilized the political order in 13th century. The Mongol king Genghis Khan stabilized the political order in Central Asia and revived the ancient Silk Route. Revived the ancient Silk Route. Full stop. Later, when the accounts of Marco Polo, Italian traveler, later when the accounts of Marco Polo arrived in Europe, later when the accounts of Marco Polo arrived in Europe, trade with China in gunpowder, paper, tea, began along with trade with China in gunpowder, paper, tea began along with mariner compass, है ना? Mariner compass तो आपको पता है, what is it? For sea navigation, along with mariner compass. Full stop. Next point. The discovery of silver mines in Eastern Europe in Central and Eastern Europe लिखिए, that is in Serbia, Bohemia and Carpathia. Promoted a monetary economy. Promoted a monetary economy. So currency. Then give a subheading, 14th century is the century of crisis. ठीक है, 14th century is the century of crisis. Problem. What was happening in 14th century in India, North India? Babur. We'll see the decline of Delhi Sultanate. First is the outbreak of Black Death. Outbreak of Black Death. Outbreak of Black Death, that is bubonic plague. By next week, I will on the portal, or I'll see in what way, I will upload a chart जिसमें वर्ल्ड में क्या हो रहा है और इंडिया में क्या हो रहा है, पैरेलली आपको दिख जाएगा. सो इससे आपको दोनों में अच्छा रहेगा. इंडियन हिस्ट्री भी आपको क्रोनोलॉजिकली इवन नॉट ईयर बट पता रहेगा ये हो रहा है, और वर्ल्ड में भी क्या हो रहा है, समझ रहे हैं. उसका प्रिंट आउट लेके घर में चिपका लेना, ठीक है. सो आपको हमेशा याद रहना चाहिए. You will be able to correlate. That is the beauty of history. So we see the outbreak of Black Death, bubonic plague, which consumed 30 to 50% of Europe's population, mainly working class. Which consumed 30 to 50% of Europe's population, mainly working class. And contributed to the decline of feudalism. Contributed to the decline of feudalism. Next, the silver mines. The silver mines were exhausted. The silver mines were exhausted, creating a monetary crisis. Silver mines were exhausted, creating a monetary crisis. The soil fertility had stagnated due to extensive cultivation. The soil fertility had stagnated due to extensive cultivation. Extensive cultivation. And parts of northern Europe witnessed mini ice age. Parts of northern Europe witnessed mini ice age. Witnessed mini ice age. Then guys, move ahead and write fall of Constantinople. Next subheading, fall of Constantinople. The Ottoman Empire defeated the Byzantines. So we see the fall of not Constantinople, but in reality the fall of Byzantine Empire. So the Ottoman Empire defeated the Byzantines, captured their territories, including Constantinople. Captured their territories, including Constantinople. I repeat, the Ottoman Empire defeated the Byzantines, captured their territories, including Constantinople. Later, they blocked the land route to the east. Later, they blocked the land route to the east. And even discriminated between European and Arab traders between the European and the Arab traders in the Indian Ocean trade, necessitating लिख लेंगे स्पेलिंग, necessitating the discovery of new trade routes to the east. Necessitating the discovery of new trade routes to the east. Full stop. 1488, Bartholomew Diaz reached the Cape of Good Hope. Reached the Cape of Good Hope. Cape is a, पढ़ते हैं केप और बे में अंतर होता है. Cape is a projected landmass in a large water body. समझ रहे हैं? And bay is उल्टा. When the water appears to intrude into the land is bay. ज्योग्राफी में पढ़ोगे, गोचे लियोंग सेक्शन है. So reach the Cape of Good Hope and using the route Vasco da Gama, reached Calicut in 1498. You know this. Now अब नया ट्रेड चलेगा. Vasco da Gama reached Calicut in 1498. Meanwhile, in 1492, Christopher Columbus and his crew landed on the Bahamas Island. Christopher Columbus and his crew landed on the Bahamas Island, and the Bahamas Island was mistaken as what? East Indies. India नहीं जी, India Island थोड़ी है, East Indies. So you should feel proud of the fact that there was a time, in fact there was a large time, a significant portion of time in human history when everybody's destination was India. सबको यहीं आना था. Attracted by India's geographical, cultural, wealth, everybody wanted to come to India. So he reached. So उसको लगा कि भाई we have reached East Indies. But who clarified? In 1510, again the Italian merchant Amerigo Vespucci. Later, Italian merchant Amerigo Vespucci announced the discovery of New World. इन्हीं के पीछे अमेरिका नाम पड़ा है. The name America has been coined after Amerigo Vespucci. So in 1510, Italian merchant Amerigo Vespucci coined the term. अपनी किताब में लिखते हैं Mundus Novus में, and he has given the term New World. अब देखिए, while all this is happening on the trade front, now we will see another thing is going to happen, that the fall of Constantinople was seen as a shock by the Christian world. The Christians were shocked that the last vestige of their pride, that is Constantinople, has been taken away by the infidel. Christians and Muslims में तो लड़ाई चली रही थी. So they were shocked, and there was a fear in Eastern Europe that we might be forced to convert to Islam. Conversion होगा, क्योंकि ये लोग भी करते थे conversion, तो उनको डर था. Now the question is that did actually conversions happen on a large scale in Eastern Europe? Nahi. Although the Ottomans, they proclaimed Islam as the state religion, theocracy was there, but never large scale conversions happened under the Ottomans. That's a reality. Otherwise Eastern Europe में आज इस्लाम होना चाहिए था. Eastern Europe, आप समझ रहे हैं which part of Europe I'm talking about? I'm talking about the Czech, Slovakia, Serbia, all that land. वहां पे तो Christianity है. Now what happened is that people, Constantinople was also the hub of scholars and intellectuals, because after during the dark ages or during the problematic time in Western Europe, all the scholars were given shelter, support by the Byzantine rulers. Suddenly these scholars feared that we might be persecuted or we might be forced to write against our natural inclination. हम पे दबाव डाला जाएगा. Now the Byzantine rule has ended, so we will not receive any such support from the Ottoman Sultan. Later the Ottoman Sultan was declared as the Khalifa. Yes. So many of these scholars अपने किताब उताब लेके भागना शुरू कर दिए, and they arrived in the Italian cities. So this also gave rise to a very important literary cultural movement called as Renaissance. Renaissance is a literary movement, a cultural movement, where a number of books were studied, and then the study of these texts led to a number of developments in the field of science, culture and philosophy also. समझ रहे हैं? So give a heading Renaissance और थोड़ा और समझते हैं what is a Renaissance. रेनेसा वर्ड का क्या मतलब है? व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ द वर्ड रेनेसा? रीबर्थ. अच्छा, रीबर्थ और रिवाइवल. सो द क्वेश्चन इज रीबर्थ ऑफ व्हाट? क्लासिकल. अच्छा, व्हाट इज क्लासिकल? ओके, फेयर इनफ. Standard benchmark. So Renaissance was a scientific movement. Yes, yes. It was a trade revival. तो 11th century से चल रहा है. Yes. Revival of humanism or rise of humanism. चलिए, ठीक है. रेनेसां वर्ड मीन्स रीबर्थ और रिवाइवल. Rebirth or revival means something which existed once, had been lost or forgotten and must be revived. ये होता रेनेसां. जैसे मान लीजिए आपके घर में, we used to, when we were in school, we used to get up early also because of the academic requirement and also because of our family culture. Then we went to college, night out start हो गया, फ्राइडे को सोते नहीं थे, है ना, 12 बजे 2 बजे 3 बजे उठ रहे हैं, नहीं. Suddenly मान लीजिए again you start the old culture which used to follow when you were with your parents. आप सुबह 5 बजे उठ करके नहा ले रहे हैं, नहीं, फिर आप then you do सूर्य नमस्कार, then means whatever prayer. This is called as Renaissance, revival. So now did you understand? This is the meaning. So Renaissance here, many of you have rightly said revival, and revival of what? Ancient Greek and Roman learning. Ancient classical texts, bilkul, it started as a literary movement, a movement where books were studied. And which were these books? Ancient Greek and Roman texts. The question is, why the study of texts was emphasized? Because these scholars who arrived from Constantinople, they said that the reason why Europe went into decline, remember I told you the term Dark Ages was coined by a scholar who said that in this period there is no intellectual development, people have become superstitious, there is no freedom for the intellectuals, they cannot say anything, church जो है उनको सजा दे देगा, even the kings are helpless. So Renaissance was a movement where a number of these books were again studied, promoted, and the ideas were discussed, because they said that we already have the reservoir of knowledge, it is just that we have ignored it for some time, the time has come to revive it. And this was possible also because there was money. Who supported these scholars? Traders and merchants and some of the kings. So Renaissance started in an urban environment. And the reason also why Renaissance could happen was because of a major invention in 1444, that was the invention of printing press. In 1444, printing press was invented by Johannes Gutenberg in Germany. He was a German. So the invention of printing press and the arrival of paper. So they learned how to make paper from the bark of the tree. Initially a lot of paper was imported from China, and this enabled the study of various texts. Earlier people had stopped studying. Padhna zaruri hai. Because if you don't study, you will not develop a thought process. So all types of subjects, humanities subjects were studied, like history, philosophy, ancient law, ethics. And the study of these texts gave rise to a new philosophy. That philosophy is called as humanism. It gave rise to a new philosophy, and we see a rise of a number of humanists. We see humanism. Humanism से individualism आता है. What is humanism? Anybody? समझिए, मैं लिखाऊंगा, पहले समझो. जो चीजें दिमाग में बैठ जाती है ना, वो याद रहती हैं. So in class, focus 80% on understanding. बताइए, humanism क्या है? Anyone? देखिए, the church had convinced mankind that everything is controlled by God. Everything that is happening on earth is related to divine. जो भी हो रहा है, bubonic plague क्यों हुआ? भगवान की माया. Why anybody is succeeding? Why anybody is failing? God wants. So human beings had, the confidence level had gone down. Humanism says that no, human life is governed by the laws which are made by humans, not by God. God has given us intellect, दिमाग दिया है. Why? To be used. Church said that the purpose of life is salvation or to get a ticket to heaven. Humanism says ऐसा नहीं है. Salvation और जो भी होना है, that will happen after death. But in this life, we have to enjoy, maximize your potential. So it has given a human-centric view of the world. Humans were placed at the center of, they were placed at the center of universe. Humans are more important, not religion. God is there. It talks about human rights, human dignity, human welfare. It started valuing human life. Every human life is precious. Everybody has the right to do well, to prosper. You must just not serve, you must grow. It said that human beings have limitless potential, they can do extraordinary things. So this perspective about human development is called as humanism. So it started talking about the development of society, that is humanism. And when from the society you center on an individual, that is individualism. इसके बाद individualism आता है. Because I told in the last class and I repeat that there was no value of human life if you are a commoner in the ancient and medieval times. आप जिंदा हैं, मर गए, क्या हो रहा है, कोई बात नहीं करता है. But now that was not the case. And you will see the impact of humanism in various spheres. Because it gave the confidence that humans can do anything. So one of the, also the reason why Europeans were the early sea explorers is because they had the confidence, humanism. Need plus confidence, दोनों बात हैं, need भी था. We see the impact of humanism in various fields. In the field of science, astronomy, where they questioned many of the dogmatic and the wrong beliefs of the church. Church के हिसाब से मानिए, or even ancient Greek philosophers used to believe that earth is at the center and the sun revolves around the earth. Geocentric planetary system. Copernicus ने कहा ऐसा नहीं है. It is heliocentric. Sun is at the center and the planets revolve around it. The church said that the earth used to rotate on its axis but has stopped rotating because it has become heavy, and it has become heavy because of the sins of mankind. Then Kepler said ऐसा थोड़ी है, day and night happens because of this. So we see that a new way of interpreting or a new way of having knowledge or acquiring knowledge came, that is called as empiricism. पढ़ते हैं आप. A new way had come, that is called as empiricism. Empiricism, आपने पढ़ा होगा, or you would have heard the word empirical. Are you feeling cold? Mini ice age. I also was feeling. Temperature को 25 डिग्री रखिए, because we are like coral reefs. We like temperature within a particular bandwidth. So I was saying that empiricism, it means acquisition of knowledge based on evidence, experimentation. So we see humanism is going to bring about a lot of change. समझ रहे? Renaissance start हुआ. We see that in the field of art and culture, paintings were made. पहले पेंटिंग्स किसके बनते थे? पहले स्टैच्यूज किसके बनते थे? आइदर ऑफ किंग्स, क्वींस और प्रीस्ट्स. गॉड तो मतलब सिर्फ जीसस क्राइस्ट है ना, बिकॉज इन एब्राहमिक रिलीजन गॉड इज फॉर्मलेस. नाउ ऑल टाइप्स, देयर वाज आर्टिस्टिक फ्रीडम, क्रिएटिव फ्रीडम वाज देयर. सो न्यू टाइप ऑफ क्लास ऑफ आर्टिस्ट इमर्ज. लियोनार्डो डा विंची, राफेल, माइकल एंजेलो. A lot of development was made in the field of medical science. Why? Because one of the reasons why there was so much of death in the Black Death, because there was neglect of health infrastructure. So we see that Renaissance was a turning point, the beginning of modernity. पढ़ते ना हम. इंडिया में भी एक रेनेसा आया था अर्ली 19th century में. आप पढ़ते हो इंडियन रेनेसा? How is Indian Renaissance similar and different from the European Renaissance? एक क्वेश्चन लिखिए. Give a comparative analysis, or in what ways? Try to attempt the question. Did you write the question on feudalism? Okay, we'll see. In what ways Indian Renaissance of 19th century, in what ways Indian Renaissance of 19th century was different from the European Renaissance of 15th century? European Renaissance of 15th century. 15th सेंचुरी। चलिए सोचिए, ठीक है। सो रेनेसां आता है, ठीक है। अब लिखिए लाइन, बोलिए, यू वांट टू से। अभी आता है ना रिफॉर्मेशन, आई एम कमिंग टू दैट, वी विल सी द इंपैक्ट ऑफ रेनेसां। बिल्कुल, इसके बाद एक मूवमेंट आएगा रिफॉर्मेशन। So, few years back they had asked a question in GS paper 1 Modern India, that how Indian Renaissance had led to the rise of Indian nationalism. So कई बार cultural and political things overlap. सोचिए, है ना, and then I will tell you. Okay, let me answer few questions of online students. Why bubonic plague led to the decline of feudalism? Why did it lead to the decline of feudalism? Scarcity of labor. Feudalism is a labor intensive exercise. अब मान लीजिए आज वर्कर्स ही नहीं रहेंगे तो कंस्ट्रक्शन इंडस्ट्री तो बैठ जाएगी। सिंपल, दैट इज इट। सो रेनेसां वॉज अ रिवाइवलिस्ट लिटरेरी मूवमेंट। लिखिए, रेनेसां वॉज अ रिवाइवलिस्ट लिटरेरी मूवमेंट associated, revivalist literary movement associated with the study of ancient Greek and Roman texts. Associated with the study of ancient Greek and Roman texts. Full stop. The availability of paper, comma, the availability of paper, comma, invention of printing press in 1444 by Johannes Gutenberg. Invention of printing press in 1444 by Johannes Gutenberg, comma, patronage by traders and merchants. Patronage means support. Patronage by traders and merchants, and the influx of scholars from Constantinople. Patronage by traders and merchants and influx of scholars and intellectuals from Constantinople contributed to it. It gave rise to a new philosophy, humanism. It gave rise to a new philosophy, humanism. Now give a subheading, humanism. So humanism क्या है? It is a new philosophy, according to which human life is governed by secular laws rather than divine. Human life is governed by secular laws rather than divine. Full stop. It placed humans at the center of creation. It placed humans at the center of creation and declared that the goal of life is no longer salvation but to grow, prosper by realizing one's potential. Humanists such as Erasmus, Pico della Mirandola, emphasized on human rights, dignity and welfare. Emphasized on human rights, dignity and welfare. Emphasized on human rights, dignity and welfare, and highlighted the limitless potential of man. Highlighted the limitless potential of man, capable of extraordinary. Capable of extraordinary. I repeat, humanism is a new philosophy according to which human life is governed by secular laws, rather than divine. It placed humans at the center of creation. And according to them, the purpose of life is no longer salvation but to grow, prosper and realize one's potential. Enjoy करिए life को. Humanists like Erasmus, Pico della Mirandola, they talk about human rights, dignity and welfare. ये लिखा है ना? Human rights, dignity, and highlight the limitless potential of man capable of extraordinary. And yes, the reality is that Renaissance started first कहाँ पे? Italy में. Trade and commerce was growing in Italy. Traders and merchants were in Italy. The scholars who are left or had run away from Constantinople, they came to Italy. Italy was the core of power of the ancient Roman civilization and also the place where the church was there. So more awareness was in Italy. So ये सब पहले कहाँ हो रहा है? Italy. Scholars, all these scholars are also Italian. So now we will see the impact of Renaissance in various spheres of life. It is given in detail, but I will explain you the core of it. Impact of Renaissance. First, in the field of science. Science में especially we see in the field of astronomy. Earlier, whatever the church used to say was accepted, or whatever scholars used to say was accepted. Nobody used to question. Aristotle ने भी यही गलती की थी, उसने भी यही बोला था. People had a different view. There was no way to validate it. Now we see validation started. So we see there was an epistemological revolution happening. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. So we see that Renaissance also led to, आप लिख सकते हैं, epistemological revolution. The beginning of epistemological revolution means the knowledge revolution. बताया था ना आपको. So अभी भी हो रहा है बहुत चीजें. We question. नहीं, आपने घर में सुना होगा, मेरे घर में भी होता है, शनिवार को नया कपड़ा मत खरीदो. नहीं, इस दिन ये मत करो, उस दिन वो मत करो. नहीं, फिर मैंने पूछा क्यों. उसके बाद नहीं पूछा मैंने. So there is a disclaimer, whatever you learn in the class, I will tell you things which is in syllabus and also related to life, never apply it at home. घर में नहीं, ठीक है. So in घर institutionalism still prevails, old order. So I asked कि भाई why on certain days of a week we should not eat non-veg? या तो मत ही खाओ. नहीं. Then I was said बहुत पढ़ लिए हो. So, but ये है epistemological revolution. Astronomy में, and what is the basis of epistemological? बहुत पढ़ेंगे हम, इसके बाद फिर पढ़ेंगे. The second stage of epistemological revolution in 18th century is enlightenment. We'll see. But the beginning was here. We see the arrival of empiricism. Empiricism. Empiricism means acquisition of knowledge based on evidence. Acquisition of knowledge based on evidence, observation and experiments. Acquisition of knowledge based on evidence, knowledge and experimentation. We read a number of empiricists. One of them was Francis Bacon. पढ़ते हो आप? England, 16th century. So we'll see the impact of empiricism in astronomy, where people like Copernicus came up with the idea of heliocentric planetary system. Heliocentric planetary system. So empiricism is the acquisition of knowledge based on evidence, observation, experiments. And we see this. Kepler explained the movement of celestial objects. So what are the laws which govern the movement of celestial objects? Kepler. In science, we see a lot of development happening in the field of medical science. A lot of development happening in the field of medical science, where books were written. Vesalius, books were written because everybody wanted human welfare, to save human life. So books were written, encouraged, books on human anatomy. Servetus, बहुत सी किताबें लिखी गई. बुक ऑन ब्लड सर्कुलेशन. So Vesalius, Servetus, lot of development was happening here. But Renaissance is also known as a cultural movement. Art and culture में बहुत change हुआ. We see a lot of development and we see a new phase of modern art emerging. लिख लिया ये सब? Right. लिखिए. We see in the field of art and culture, a new form of art has emerged based on humanism. We see that in this art there was artistic freedom. What is art? An expression of human creativity is art. There was dignity of artists. And what was the purpose of art? Objective. Purpose was sense gratification. Purpose was sense gratification. Matlab, you should feel happy. In the medieval times, during Dark Ages, even if some paintings were made, they were only of god, priests, church used to say that art is a way of religious education. But now, not only religious but secular paintings were made. Mona Lisa, padhte. All types, there is freedom. So the purpose of art is sense gratification. Sense को अच्छा लगना चाहिए. Visual sense. No longer religious education. So we read that all types of diverse themes in painting, sculpture, all this emerged. So diverse themes were there. A number of artists emerged. Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, who made all types of. Da Vinci was a multi-talented person, polymath, engineer भी थे, mathematician, sculptor, painter, pianist. So he applied all his knowledge in his paintings. He measured human body proportion ratio. और आप देखते हैं डा विंची कोड देखा होगा. So triangle and circle सारा. So painting now became a profession. They became professionals who could sell their paintings independently. पहले क्या होता था, राजा के लिए काम कर रहे हैं, चर्च के लिए काम कर रहे हैं. Now you see it has been given rise to independence. But while all this was happening, another revolution is going to happen, and that is in the field of religion. Because when printing press was invented, which was the first book to be printed? Bible. And everybody wanted to know what is there in the Bible. Because Latin, the language in which Bible was preserved in the West, was not known to majority. And with the arrival of printing press and the availability of paper, not only Bible was printed in large number, but also the translation of Bible in various languages began. So now the Bible was not available with the masses, but at least with many priests, scholars, students. And they started studying Bible and interpreting the teachings in Bible, which gave rise to a culture of religious debates. And while Bible was studied, they also found out that the church has been fooling us. So many of the practices or whatever the church said, many of the things are not there in the Bible. In 1517, a German priest whose name was Martin Luther, when he read the Bible, he understood that the way Christianity is being practiced now is very different from what was envisaged in the Bible. He read and he was very angry to find out that there is no reference of the letter of indulgence. So the church, one of the major source of income for the church was the letter of indulgence. And he realized that I must spread the awareness amongst the masses about the malpractices of the church. So he sold his ancestral land, purchased a printing press, and started publishing a pamphlet, 95 theses. रात भर बैठ के छापता था, सुबह जाकर के सब जगह पे चिपका देता था, in which he had given various references, and he said that faith is more important than rituals. The just shall live by faith. The person who is closer to God is not the person who is performing the rituals, because Christianity had become a ritualistic thing, but a person who practices true faith. And his ideas gave rise to a religious movement that is called as Reformation. Reformation started in Germany or in German states because of Martin Luther. And later many kings supported Reformation because they were also not happy with the church. So Reformation later also became Protestantism, or many call it as Protestant Reformation. Germany से ये आग शुरू हुई थी and it started spreading very rapidly, questioning a number of other things, not only the letter of indulgence, but many kings who supported Protestantism protested against the authority of Roman Pope, over all the churches. Why are we listening blindly to the Pope? Roman Pope had become the very powerful figure. So all those states where the kings declared themselves as Protestant states, they separated themselves from the Roman Pope. Means they would no longer recognize the authority of the Pope. And in all these states, the head of the church, means the state head of the church, would be appointed by the king. They also said that we will try to bring about, Reformation began as a reformative exercise. Reform matlab samajhte hain aap? Reform of the church according to the tenets of Bible. It does not say that we will completely abolish religion. Religion mein problem nahi hai. The problem is with the church. Not all are corrupt, but those who are corrupt must be removed. Not what is mentioned in the Bible must be eradicated. So it started questioning one practice, but many other practices were questioned. And many other radical groups and thinkers emerged during Reformation. Like in Switzerland, we see that another great thinker emerged known as Ulrich Zwingli. In France, Jean Calvin. In Central Europe, a group of thinkers, a society emerged known as Anabaptist, which said that baptism should be of the adult, not of children. Because children ko to pata hi nahi hai. Because atheism or agnosticism was also accepted as a way of life. You may choose to believe or not believe in God. So we see that this movement started spreading like a wildfire. And the basis of this was that faith is more important. Church is a facilitator. Church is not an end, just a means towards an end. Roman Pope is not king, he is just a priest. So many said we, and who supported? Many kings also supported. Because the kings were also fed up, and because of trade and commerce and everything, they also saw a way to detach or reduce their dependency on the church, and definitely they had become stronger because of the decline of feudalism. So this is called as Protestantism. अब कई बार Protestantism is compared to the Bhakti Sufi movement in medieval India. There is a comparison. That in Bhakti Sufi movement also you see that there is a common element, that it also talks about devotion. It says that even if there is no temple, even if there is no mosque, still you can reach out to God in personal capacity. Even if you don't know how to read the texts, scriptures, still you can reach out to God. But we also see that even if Bhakti Sufi movement has commonality with European Protestantism, the Bhakti Sufi movement, especially the Bhakti movement, is different from Protestantism in a way that Bhakti Sufi movement did not have a political impact. But Protestantism started as a religious movement, but what was the impact of it? Political. And that is why in Central and Western Europe, a number of Protestant states emerged, where the kings declared, क्योंकि उस समय the religious or what is a state, whether it is a Catholic or a Protestant, is discussed or decided by whom? King. A number of Protestant states, Netherlands. कुछ राजा अपने they declared because not they were unhappy with the church, but because they wanted to be powerful. In England, the King Henry VIII initially did not have problems with the Roman Pope or the popes. सारे पोप के ऊपर में एक रोमन पोप होता है. But when the Pope stopped him from his second marriage, he had by his first marriage with Catherine, he did not have a male heir to the throne. So he said that I will give her divorce and I will have second wife. But the first wife happened to be one of the cousins of a French priest. So the priest said that we do not recognize and you cannot dissolve this marriage. He said, I am the king. I can marry. So उसको दिख गया कि मौका है ही. So Henry VIII declared that I am the head of the church. So Britain में भी Protestantism आ गया. So a number of Protestant states emerged. Germany, Switzerland, England, Netherlands. समझ आ गया? Give a heading Reformation. Yes, please. Was the nahin. In Eastern Europe, the Orthodox Church was not affected because the problems were not there. These problems, Because of the Byzantine rule, the church never could become as powerful in the east like it had become in the west. Because of the political decline, the church had become powerful. In the east, the Byzantines continued to rule, and after the fall of Byzantines, Islamic rule had emerged, so church kabhi itna powerful ban hi nahi paya. The rise of the powerful church in the east was seen only in one area, but never more than the king. But yes, it was amongst the people. That is, the Orthodox Church was powerful in Russia. Russia. Yes, those who continue to accept the authority of Roman Pope are Catholics. Who do not are Protestants. So this is also, Reformation is also a sub-division of Renaissance, or it is also an impact of Renaissance. Renaissance chal hi raha hai. Renaissance is a cultural movement, is a literary movement, is an educational movement. But then another thing is going on, that is Reformation. So Reformation ye hai. So right, the study of Bible in various languages, the study of Bible in various languages promoted a culture of religious debates and discourse. Promoted a culture of religious debates and discourse in parts of Europe. It also exposed the hypocrisy of the church. Full stop. Later in 1517, a German priest, who? Martin Luther. A German priest, Martin Luther, published a pamphlet "95 Theses" in which he criticized the sale of letter of indulgence. In which he criticized the sale of letter of indulgence and emphasized that faith, not rituals, lead to salvation. So he said that faith, not rituals, lead to salvation. In which he criticized the sale of letter of indulgence and emphasized that faith, not rituals, lead to salvation. So he said that faith is more important. His radical ideas gave rise to Reformation. His radical ideas gave rise to a religious movement, that is Reformation. Reformation. His radical ideas, extreme ideas, gave rise to a religious movement, that is Reformation. It started in Germany and spread. So we see a number of reformists who talk about reform of the church. Church को बदलना होगा. So we see that spread of reformism. We see the spread of Reformation. Like in Switzerland, we see Huldrych Zwingli. In France, John Calvin, we see in Central Europe a group, a society had emerged. Anabaptists, what are they saying? Baptism only of the adults. So we see the spread of who? Machiavelli is a political thinker who was supported by a banking family known as House of Medici. क्योंकि देखिए, while all this is happening, Renaissance is happening, Renaissance is a epistemological revolution, or it is a philosophical revolution. It is a cultural revolution where new ideas would begin to emerge. So when all this is happening, conflicts were also happening, and at that time, in the period of Renaissance in Italy, in the period, we see that there were several conflicts happening between, trade houses जो compete कर रहे थे एक दूसरे के खिलाफ. In this background, the role of the state also was questioned, क्योंकि सारी बातें हो रही है. इसी बीच में एक बहुत फेमस किताब लिखी गई by Machiavelli, The Prince. Machiavelli's book The Prince is a book on statecraft, like we have Arthashastra by Kautilya in India, जो कहते हैं कि what is a king supposed to do and how state must be effectively ruled. In what ways the king can maximize his potential. बहुत चीजें लिखते हैं. What is the role of ethics and morality in state? What is the role of religion? So ये सारी चीजें उस बैकग्राउंड में आती हैं. Machiavelli's book The Prince is written in the period of 14th century, 15th century के दौरान आता है. I told you that Renaissance started as a literary movement. शुरुआत ऐसे हुआ, but the impact is all around. So it should not be only called as a literary cultural movement. आप देखिए religion में change आया, and the impact of religion will be in politics. But all this could happen, why? Because of the opening up of the society due to trade and commerce. Had trade and commerce not happened, because Renaissance was an urban phenomena. Who were mainly affected? The people in urban areas. Still the people in villages were not much affected by Renaissance. So, we see this is happening. Reformation was supported by a number of monarchs. Reformation was supported by a number of monarchs. Giving rise to Protestantism. So, a number of kings supported Protestantism. पहले Reformation, फिर Protestantism. Protestantism rejected the authority. Protestantism rejected the authority of the Roman Pope over individual churches, and henceforth the Protestant states, henceforth in the Protestant states, it rejected the authority of the Roman Pope over individual churches, and in the Protestant states, head of the church was appointed by whom? King. Henceforth, in the Protestant states, head of the church was appointed by the king. क्या हुआ, नहीं लिख पा रहे हैं क्या? बहुत फास्ट हो रहा है? कोई बात नहीं. You will learn how to write fast with me. So I repeat that Protestantism, it was supported by a number of monarchs, Reformation, which rejected the authority of the Roman Pope over the individual churches. And in these states, the head of the church was appointed by the king. They separated themselves. The Protestant states do not recognize the authority of the Roman Pope. Which are the Protestant states? Netherlands, है ना, इंग्लैंड. इंग्लैंड में द किंग हेनरी द एट ऑन विच इशू? रॉयल डिवोर्स. जर्मन स्टेट्स, उस समय जर्मनी वॉज नॉट अ कंट्री. स्विट्जरलैंड एटसेट्रा. अमेरिका भी बाद में हम देखेंगे वुड बिकम अ प्रोटेस्टेंट स्टेट. आज भी आप देखिए. So these are Protestant states, some of the early Protestant states. ठीक है, लिख लिया. So while all this is happening, what was the response of the church? समझ रहे हैं? What is the response of the church? Because Protestantism and Reformation is an attack on the authority of the church and of the Roman Pope. It is an attack, and many states, यहां पर भी था, but in those states where it was supported by the king, the individual church could not do. But in other states, because the king still were fearful, what will happen if we support this movement? God will be angry and we might lose our power. ऐसा मानते थे. Still religion was revered. So a council बुलाया गया. A council was convened in 1534, Council of Trent, where the Roman Pope and many of the higher priests, they sat together and they discussed, because initially they had tried to suppress the movement. They had criticized and they declared that this, what Calvin, Zwingli or Luther is doing is heresy. It is a crime, sin. But they did not care. Que sera sera. Why? Because people supported, kings supported. So now this was a serious threat to the church. So council was convened, 1534 Council of Trent, where they discussed at length the prevailing problem and also the situation within the church. And they recognized that yes, the church has gone along the wrong path. They realized that the church has gone astray. Many of the members of the church have become corrupt. Christianity no longer is as it was 700, 800 years back. There is a need to arrest this decline, otherwise Christianity will fall. Because डर तो था ही, इस्लाम फैल रहा था. So they realized that we must do something about the internal challenge. Anyways, the Eastern Europe had dissociated themselves from the religion of Central and Western Europe. Byzantines का जो Christianity था and the Christianity of Western Europe was different. Anyways, the Byzantines never recognized the authority of the Roman Pope. The Christianity in Eastern Europe was always a simpler Christianity. There they did not use Latin, they used Greek language. And there was a simple priest. So suddenly because of this, they realized that we must reform the church. Karna hai reformation. There is a need to focus on the right practices. There is a need to focus on the right messages. We should go back to the drawing board. We should again start social service. Like Jesus had become a Messiah by social service. We should focus on morality and ethics. We should remove all the corrupt. So this movement of reform is called as counter-reformation. Reformation के बाद church में जो reform आया by the members of the church is called as counter-reformation. But they said that we will continue to accept the authority of the Pope. Pope is a uniting force. Pope से problem नहीं है. The problem is within. So this movement was called as counter-reformation, or it was also called as Catholic Reformation. And the kings or those states where this idea was supported and who continued to recognize the Pope were called as Catholics. Spain, Portugal, France, Ireland, all these are Catholic states. And they realized that Christianity must spread. Like Islam is spreading, Christianity must also spread. So there was a Spanish soldier whose name was Ignatius Loyola. If you are heard the name Ignatius Loyola. People in Catholic school read about Loyola. He was a Spanish soldier who set up a society known as Society of Jesus, which would, spread Christianity to different parts. The idea was also to promote religious conversions. So the followers or the members of Society of Jesus are called as Jesuits. आप पढ़ते हो that when the Portuguese arrived in India, they came to India also with a religious mission. Who gave that mission? Pope. God, glory and gold. That is why they arrived. And we read that one of the prominent Jesuits who arrived along with the Portuguese in India was Saint Xavier. Saint Xavier was the person who popularized Christianity first in Goa and then in various pockets wherever the Portuguese. So India में Christianity बहुत बार आया है. Portuguese, French, Britishers. But the difference is that Portuguese were very overexcited and overcommitted, so much so that this strategy backfired. So आप पढ़ोगे again in modern India that one of the reasons why the Portuguese declined is because they started after their arrival forced religious conversion. And therefore there was a reprisal. French never attempted. British never did so. Because British को पता था कि इंडिया में आप सब कुछ ले लो. You take their land, you take their political power, you take their money, but don't touch their religion. They were pragmatic. Protestants are not over enthusiastic about religious conversions. बाद में हम देखेंगे मैक्स वेबर की थियरी है that what separates the Protestants from the Catholics is not only religion but also the nature of economy. This is a theory, we will see. Did you understand? So now give a heading: Counter Reformation / Catholic Reformation. Counter Reformation / Catholic. Catholic Reformation. Following the 1534 C Council of Trent, following the 1534 Council of Trent, that is an assembly of Catholic priests, reform within the church practices began. With emphasis on social service, and moral regeneration. Full stop. The Catholic states continued to recognize the authority of Roman Pope. So which are the Catholic states? Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Italy, France. You should know the Catholic states. Ignatius Loyola created the Society of Jesus. To spread Catholicism. to spread Catholicism, and its members, that is Jesuits, spread to various parts of the world. In India, Saint Xavier arrived with the Portuguese. In India, Saint Xavier arrived with the Portuguese. Spreading Catholicism. And later he moved to Japan and China. So he moved to Japan and China. So Christianity arrived then in Japan and China also. ठीक है.
That's why the many Indian schools have a name on St. Xavier's School or like Loyola, many of the.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
So it is a way of spreading the Christianity.
बिल्कुल. नहीं है ही. देखो इंडिया में आप देखे होंगे कि सर्टेन पॉकेट्स ऑफ इंडिया हैव अ डिस्टिंक्ट कल्चर. जैसे इफ यू गो टू गोवा, you see Iberian architecture, that is Portuguese architecture. In Portuguese brought a number of their culture. गोवा में फुटबॉल का कल्चर कहां से आया? पोर्चुगीज. फिर पोर्चुगीज आप देखिए इन पार्ट्स ऑफ बंगाल ऑल्सो दे वर देयर, बट बंगाल से फिर भागा दिए गए. वाई? बिकॉज दे स्टार्टेड लूट एंड प्लंडर इन देयर ओन लैंड. फ्रेंच केम टू पौंडीचेरी एंड फ्रेंच ऑल्सो प्रोमोटेड फुटबॉल. नॉर्थ ईस्ट में गए. सो देखिए इंडिया में फुटबॉल किन किन जगहों पे फेमस है. यहां पे ब्रिटिशर्स ब्रॉट क्रिकेट इन इंडिया, समझ रहे? एंड बिकॉज दे रूल्ड ओवर लार्जर पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया, सो वी हैव मोर क्रिकेटिंग कल्चर. सो कॉमन सेंस है. प्लीज. Saint Thomas, okay. Christianity, when did it arrive first in India? Saint Thomas. Saint Thomas was one of the first 5 disciples of Jesus. Jesus के बारे में कहा जाता है that when Jesus was crucified and 3 days later Jesus resurrected, फिर से वापस आए. सबके सामने नहीं, 5 लोगों के सामने. तो थॉमस को भरोसा नहीं हुआ, बोला नहीं आप जीसस नहीं. जीसस बोले चेक कर लो, मतलब भगवान आए, बोले नहीं आप नहीं हो. तो देन थॉमस ने उनकी हाथ में इन द पाम वो ऐसे उंगली डाल के देखते हैं कि सच में इफ देयर इज अ होल, बिकॉज इट वाज पियर्स्ड. उस समय से इंग्लिश में एक टर्म आ गया है डाउटिंग थॉमस. जो बहुत शकी इंसान है उसको डाउटिंग थॉमस कहते हैं. बट क्रिश्चियनिटी अराइव्ड आफ्टर फ्यू. इनफैक्ट यू वुड बी एस्टोनिश्ड टू नो दैट इन इंडिया क्रिश्चियनिटी अराइव्ड अर्लियर देन इट अराइव्ड इन यूरोप. यूरोप से पहले इंडिया में आ गया था, बट इट डिड नॉट बिकम एज पॉपुलर. Because what was the prominent religion at that time in India? Buddhism. When he arrived, Mahayana Buddhism was very prominent. In the north and in south, we see that there was Sangam religion was there. आप पढ़ते हो Sangam texts. इसलिए इतना पॉपुलर नहीं हुआ. Because the political class did not patronize religion की पॉपुलैरिटी में political class का बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट रोल है. आप मानते हो ना? So that is why religion and politics cannot be separated. Next chapter is American Revolution. But before we go to American Revolution, because America is an example of a colony, a settler's colony. So first let us briefly understand what is the difference, what do you understand by colonialism? समझते हैं आप लोग? Because colonialism, imperialism is something that we also have to study later in the form of decolonization. So it is important to understand the concept and then move ahead. So what do you understand by imperialism and what do you understand by colonialism? सुना है ये वर्ड्स? Imperialism and colonialism. What is any term, कोई भी बताइए. Yes, please. So in India we had imperialism or colonialism. They did not eradicate us. They could not. Acha. Yes. What is imperialism? Projection of power. बोलिए बोलिए. इंपीरियलिज्म बता रहे हैं, कॉलोनियलिज्म. हाँ, इंपीरियलिज्म इज प्रोजेक्शन ऑफ पावर ऑन होम. हाउ वुड यू प्रोजेक्ट पावर? Territorial expansion. Occupying a territory is imperialism.
In imperialism, sir, they will dominate British or other foreign companies will dominate the market. But in colonialism, the exploitation and the territorial expansion will take place.
So आप कह रहे हैं imperialism में territorial expansion है, आप कह रहे हैं colonialism में है. में racial supremacy नहीं है. Britishers they always said this idea. Is what? And colonialism is political, no economic, and economic, no cultural, no psychological, no social. So आज के दुनिया में इंपीरियलिज्म है कि कॉलोनियलिज्म है, और नन, और बोथ. यूपीएससी पूछता है ना, ओनली वन स्टेटमेंट इज राइट, टू स्टेटमेंट्स आर राइट, थ्री स्टेटमेंट्स आर राइट. न्यू कॉलोनियलिज्म. ओके, यू आर गेटिंग इनटू द ट्रैप. व्हाट इज न्यू कॉलोनियलिज्म? Ideological. Give me examples. Example दीजिए. ठीक है. Globalization is colonialism. Give. Cultural homogenization is happening today. How? Do you think Americanization is happening? Imperialism is a word which is derived from the Latin word imperium. Imperium means to have control. To have control or influence, लिखिए, over a foreign territory, underline the foreign territory. To have control and influence over a foreign territory through direct and indirect means. I'll explain. To have control and influence over a foreign territory through direct and indirect means. It was the ideology reflected in the territorial expansion. It was an ideology reflected in the territorial expansion of ancient rulers. It was an ideology reflected in the territorial expansion of ancient rulers. Became popular in 19th century. So imperialism ideology coin कब हुआ था? 19th century. Became popular in 19th century due to Napoleonic wars. Napoleon was expanding. Due to Napoleonic wars. Napoleonic wars of 19th century led to many to coin the term imperialism. It prevails even today It prevails even today in the form of neo-colonialism. You are right. I'll explain this is also what is neo-colonialism. So basically, there are many ways in which one power can control a foreign territory. It can be direct or indirect. In ancient times, one of the simplest way was to capture territories. Territorial expansionist policy of Alexander. बढ़ते हैं. So basically, in imperialism, colonialism, there are two stakeholders. One is called as metropole. Metropole is that power which is expanding. And then there is a foreign territory. Foreign territory, and it exercises influence and control. लिखा है ना? It can be direct or indirect. There are multiple ways in which, and then can be multiple purposes also for this. For example, in ancient India, you read Ashwamedh Yagya. Very simpler example of imperialism. You have unleashed your horse, और जहां जहां वो जा रहा है, और जिसने उसको देख लिया, मान लिया, did not challenge, means has accepted your political suzerainty. पढ़ते हैं, imperialism का example है. Metropole is that superior power. Imperial power को metropole कहते हैं. For example, you read again in ancient India. फिर मैं आपको यूरोप का example देता हूं. You read Samudragupta defeated the rulers of South India but allowed them to rule. ये भी एक तरीका है. दूसरा आप देखते हो अशोक capturing territories, imperialism. He wants to expand his influence, direct or indirect. है ना? अब पढ़ते हो चोलास, imperial chol in Southeast Asia. You don't have to bring it under control, but you have influence. आप जो बोलोगे वही करेगा. You read Romans, they used to expand. Greeks. So that is called as imperialism. It has continued in the past, but the terminology became popular in 19th century. Why? Because Europe was facing the crisis of Napoleon's expansionism. Today also it has exists, but in a very different format. Today this territorial concept नहीं है. But today it exists in multiple ways, and one of the most common ways is neo-colonialism. Neo-colonialism, which is also called as economic imperialism. So a superior economy is controlling or is influencing the policies of a dependent economy, inferior economy. Economic inequality leading to political subordination. Just example, America. So you see, economic imperialism is based on economic dependence. Of weaker states dependent upon aid, grants, loans of stronger states. Dependent upon the aids, grants, loans of the stronger states. So it starts in the form of economic transaction, but then it has a political connotation also. Agreed? Example. During Cold War, US had come up with Marshall Plan. सुना है word? After World War II, many European states were in a very bad shape. So from 1947, US came up with an economic package, Marshall Plan. But those who availed the Marshall Plan had to listen to US and also be within their bloc, capitalist bloc. मार्शल प्लान ड्यूरिंग कोल्ड वॉर. रशिया का उसी तरह से था मोलोटोव प्लान. So this was not a Dakshina. This was a way by which they used to control the foreign policy of the dependent states. आप पढ़ते हो आज चाइना's चेकबुक डिप्लोमेसी. चेकबुक, चाइना चेकबुक दे देता है, ये लो, कितना पैसा चाहिए, ये लो, 1% इंटरेस्ट. बट एक क्लॉज है दैट अंटिल यू रीपे योर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, जिसके लिए आप ये पैसा ले रहे हो, वो हम कंट्रोल करेंगे. हम्बन टोटा पोर्ट, सीपीईसी इन पाकिस्तान. चाइना को पता है पाकिस्तान कभी पैसा वापस नहीं करेगा, भिखारी देश है. सो इट इज कंट्रोलिंग द फॉरेन पॉलिसीज ऑफ इट. बांग्लादेश, नेपाल क्या कर रहा है, समझ रहे हैं. सो दिस इज समथिंग दैट चाइना इज डूइंग टुडे. चाइनाज चेकबुक डिप्लोमेसी, डेट ट्रैप पढ़ते हैं ना, डेट ट्रैप पॉलिसी, चेकबुक डिप्लोमेसी. सो दिस इज वेरी कॉमन. बहुत तरीके से किया गया. ये तो एक तरीका है डायरेक्ट लोन. दूसरा है यूएस हैव बीन डूइंग दैट नॉट ओनली डायरेक्टली बट थ्रू institutions like IMF and World Bank. IMF and World Bank used to give loans, but the loans were not simple loans, they were conditional loans. India also faced this crisis, balance of payment crisis, 1991, जब हमको अपना सोना गिरवी रखना पड़ा था. तो देन दे सेड कि ठीक है, पैसा तो देंगे, इंटरेस्ट भी दोगे, लेकिन यू हैव टू ब्रिंग अबाउट चेंजेस, मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक चेंजेस. चलो वो अलग बात है, हमारे फेवर में आ गया. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड एज स्ट्रक्चरल और कंडीशनल लोन्स विच कम विथ स्ट्रक्चरल एडजस्टमेंट क्राइटेरिया. सो दिस इज देयर. दिस इज ऑल्सो फॉर्म ऑफ इन्फ्लुएंस. अनदर फॉर्म ऑफ न्यू कॉलोनियलिज्म you see is military dependence. आज भी ऐसा है that many of the former colonies still have the presence of their military powers of their former colonial master. जैसे US troops in Philippines, पढ़ते हो? Japan was dependent on US for its defense for a number of years. Example. There are many examples. Military dependence. France in West Africa. France was a colonial power in West Africa, and even after granting them independence, still the military control is in whose hand? This is also a form of neo-colonialism. India और US में लड़ाई इसी बात से हुई that US was giving us, after we became independence, we were facing a food crisis, and US was giving us grains at subsidized rate under their very famous program PL 480, Public Law 480. After a point US said कि आप NATO join कर लीजिए. Nehru ji said नहीं, we will not join NATO because we fear unnecessarily we will be dragged in war. सरदार पटेल चिट्ठी लिखते हैं, ये गलती कर रहे हैं आप, ज्वाइन कर लो नाटो, बिकॉज वी आर फेसिंग हॉस्टाइल नेबर्स, पाकिस्तान इधर, चाइना इधर. लाइक इजराइल इज सराउंडेड बाय हॉस्टाइल स्टेट्स, इंडिया इज सराउंडेड बाय 2 हॉस्टाइल नेबर्स, बट वी डिडंट ज्वाइन. बट यूएस ऑलवेज केप्ट अ क्लोज आई ऑन अस. इसलिए आफ्टर नेहरू, व्हेन लाल बहादुर शास्त्री, who initially was against the nuclear program of Homi Jahangir Bhabha, but later had clear inputs that China is developing a nuclear bomb, and he gave a trunk call from Tashkent to Bhabha that go ahead. Within few hours he dies. So they have done all type of atrocities and wrong things in the world in the name of this. Another way in which, so military dependence आपने देखा, military dependence has been there. Taiwan, US, this is a form. Philippines, US. Another phenomena is cultural. किसी ने कहा cultural. There is a very interesting way, soft power diplomacy, McDonaldization, cultural diplomacy, cultural imperialism कहते हैं. 1990s में इंडिया में cultural imperialism हुआ, because after globalization we see suddenly a culture of जंक फूड, जीन्स पहनना लोग शुरू कर दिए. 1980s की मूवीज में आप किसी को जीन्स नहीं देखोगे. जीन्स वाज अ थिंग दैट वाज एक्चुअली मेड इन फ्रांस फॉर द वर्किंग क्लास, ताकि धोना ना पड़े. इट इज रजेड, हम पहनते भी जीन्स इसलिए हैं. सो वी फाइंड we find that there is cultural diplomacy, cultural imperialism. आप समझ रहे हो? एग्जाम्पल मैकडोनल्डाइजेशन. हॉलीवुड कल्चर है ना, ये सब कब शुरू हुआ? 1990s. सो दिस इज यस, हाँ वही 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 मैकडोनल्ड फास्ट फूड, बिल्कुल वही है, बर्गर. बर्गर वर्ड इज डिराइव फ्रॉम बगर. बगर मतलब चोर. नहीं नहीं, रियलिटी इज दैट इन इंग्लिश पीपल यूज दिस वर्ड बगर. वाई? बिकॉज आप देखिए बर्गर कैसे बनता है, कुछ इधर से चुरा लिया, कुछ इधर से नहीं. सो इट वॉज डेवलप्ड एज अ फूड. अब देखो सब चीज की अपनी हिस्ट्री है. इट वॉज डेवलप्ड एज अ फूड इन अर्बन एरियाज जहां पे समय नहीं था खाना बनाने का. इन द वेस्ट फास्ट फूड कल्चर यही है. एंड वेयर डिड इट डेवलप? इन अर्बन एरियाज. एंड पीपल इन यूरोप यूज्ड टू कॉल द पीपल इन अर्बन एरियाज एज बर्गर्स. सो दिस वर्ड रेजोनेटेड और आज बर्गर बन गया है. अगली बार खाइएगा याद रखिएगा. इंपीरियलिज्म कहां है? इंडियन डायस्पोरा कैन एक्ट एज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टूल फॉर सॉफ्ट पावर डिप्लोमेसी. इंडिया कहां इंपीरियलिज्म कर रहा है? हम कहां दबाव देते हैं किसी पे? नो नो नो, यू आर सेइंग सॉफ्ट पावर डिप्लोमेसी. आई एम सेइंग इंपीरियलिज्म मीन्स यू ट्राई टू एक्सर्ट. इंडिया हैज गिवन सो मच ऑफ हेल्प to its neighbors but never has interfered in its internal policies, and it has backfired also. We have been criticized and accused of being big brother. आप पढ़िए गुजरात डॉक्ट्रिन के समय से we have been giving, और आज देखो नेपाल, बांग्लादेश, मॉलडीव्स को लेकर चिंता नहीं करना है. ग्लोबल वार्मिंग विल टेक केयर ऑफ इट. आफ्टर 30-40 years there will be no Maldives and they will come to us. So don't worry. I never say that Maldives is not anything to be concerned of. ठीक है. So colonialism. अब इस पर बात करते हैं. Colonialism is a recent phenomena. From 16th century to Second World War. Colonialism is derived from the Latin word colonia, which means to settle in a foreign land. Now, just not means settle, but इसका कुछ और मतलब भी है. Sorry, to settle in a foreign land. Colonialism is a subset of imperialism. So imperialism बहुत तरह से होते हैं, direct, indirect. Like neo-colonialism is indirect. Territorial expansion is direct. So one of the forms of direct imperialism is colonialism. So colonialism is a cause. Imperialism is the cause. Colonialism is a way of practicing it. There are many ways. This is there. It is a subset of it. समझ रहे हैं? So you see, imperialism में बहुत कुछ तरीके हैं. आप देख रहे हैं ये सारा तरीका है. But one of the most common and exploitative form is colonialism, which has emerged from 16th century. In colonialism, you see, लिखिए, it is associated with the transfer of population. It is associated with the transfer of population from a metropole to a colony. It is associated with a transfer of population from a metropole to a colony for administration. So why do people come? Administration, comma, systemic exploitation of resources, leading to the drain of wealth. आप समझ रहे हो, drain of wealth हो रहा है. Leading to the drain of wealth and in some cases also invasion. In some cases also invasion. An element of discrimination, full stop, an element of discrimination is practiced between, an element of invasion is practiced, an element of discrimination is practiced by the colonizers, with respect to the native population in the colony. With respect to the native population in the colony. कुछ समझ में आया? Did you understand? So, in colonialism, we see that there is a transfer of population. So, people come in imperialism, may or may not. And why they come? And because they want organized loot, systematic and continued drain of wealth. And there are many ways in which they can do. And therefore, there are different types of colonies also. Like India was an example of a trade colony, where although the Britishers arrived and settled, but they never settled for always. Administrators used to come, go. But there was systematic drain of wealth in various ways. पढ़ते हो drain of wealth theory. Like the Indonesians in Indonesia, the Dutch had come. French in Vietnam. So this is a temporary settlement. आ रहे हैं, जा रहे हैं. And mechanisms are there. But there is a form of colonialism in which people from the metropole come, displace the native people, capture their land resources, settle there for always. And it is through these settlers that the mother country continues to exploit the colony. Example, America. America में जो white population है, the white population today in America are basically European settlers, many of them were from Britain. Example, South Africa, where earlier Dutch for people from Netherlands had come, invaded the land. Australia, South America, where Spanish and Portuguese. So you might ask the question that why did they not do it in India? Because the settlers colony happened in those parts of the world where the population density was not more, where there was more resources but population was less, so it was easy for large chunk of population to come. India mein already there was so much of density of population, it would not be possible, practically not possible, politically not possible. So they exploited us in a different way. So जहां जहां उनको free land मिला, wherever they got free land or they found empty land or land which was open for exploitation, they captured it. जैसे मान लीजिए आज मार्स पे हम जाकर के जो है कब्जा कर लेते हैं, and many Indians start going settling there. This is an example of settlers colony. समझ रहे हैं? America is there. So there are various forms of colonialism, trade colonialism, settlers colonialism. There is also a form of colonialism known as a protectorate state, protectorate, where you continue to loot the colony but you allow the local king to remain. राजा को आप रहने देते हो. Protectorate, like the British जब इंडिया में थे, the princely states were a protectorate of it. समझ रहे हैं? They allowed the political apparatus but they continued to loot. So there are different forms. What you have to keep in mind is that based on the difference in the nature of colonialism, the nature of colonial struggle or colonial independence will be different. For example, when in India, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, or in many parts of Africa, when the freedom struggle was fought, it was fought between the natives and the colonial powers. But in a settlers colony, say America, South Africa, Canada, South America, Australia, the conflict or the struggle or the revolution, whatever you call it, will be a struggle between the settlers and their parent country. Because after a point of time, the settlers would not want to pass on the benefits to the mother country, because for them, this place where they have settled is their homeland. आप समझ गए? Means in America, which we are going to start, when the British settlers had arrived, English settlers largely. So for years, or I would say more than a century, the crown or the British English used to benefit from it. But after a point of time, the Americans did not want to pass on the benefit. They said that this is our land, we will not recognize your overlordship. And they fought for independence. So दो तरह का struggle चल रहा है. There are two types of struggle that is going to happen. One is between the settlers and the parent country, and second between the settlers and the indigenous population. उनसे भी लड़ रहे हैं. Unfortunately, the indigenous population would be sidelined. Later on, they will be given some rights, like the blacks today in America. They continue to be treated as second grade citizens. Even today we see. Few years back you had read that because of a racial incident, Black Lives Matter movement had started. You read about Martin Luther King. समझ रहे हैं आप? So now we will understand American Revolution. So we having understood what is colonialism, what is imperialism, we will move and understand American Revolution. American Revolution, the time period of the revolution is from 1776 to 1783. But ठीक है, ये तो बाद में आता है. Why they fought against the British, देखेंगे. In what circumstances they fought against the British, we will see. But first we will understand the background to it. We will understand the background to it. So as I told you that in 1492, ये तो बताया था, Columbus landed on the Bahamas island. Christopher Columbus and his sea exploration was funded by the Spanish Queen Isabella. उसने प्रॉमिस किया था, Columbus had promised to the Spanish ruler queen that whatever I get there will be yours. Europeans दुनिया में इसलिए भी निकल रहे थे, one because for the new trade routes, second to expand Christianity, and third reason was in search of gold. Europeans had a firm belief that God has hid all the gold and silver in a secret island. वो मानते थे, ऐसी कहानियां सुनते थे. They had heard of the story of El Dorado. मिशनरीज नहीं, सी एक्सप्लोरर्स. आप देखते हो कार्टून नेटवर्क में दिखाता ना, टिन सिंदबाद. तो मानते थे वो लोग दुनिया में है ऐसी कुछ जगह जहां पे सोना है. सो उनको लगता था एक दिन हम खोज निकालेंगे. सो दिस वॉज ऑल्सो फैंटेसी फॉर देम. Why there is so much of fascination with gold? Why people are so much mad for gold? बाकी मेटल भी तो है, प्लैटिनम, चांदी. Why gold? कभी सोचा है गोल्ड rare and beautiful? Nothing beautiful about gold. Let me tell you, there is nothing beautiful about gold. It is not rare also. It is considered as God metal, right? Gold does not corrode. Gold is seen as immortal. तो लोग मानते थे कि भगवान ने खुद के लिए बनाया था ये. It is a gift. A gift which God has given to us when the asteroid hit the earth. ऐसा माना जाता है. There is no historical evidence that because of an asteroid, gold has come. नहीं? So what happened that Christopher Columbus arrived and he did not find gold. But he went and told the Spanish ruler that there are a lot of native tribes here And hence the Spanish came in search of slaves. शुरुआत इसलिए हुई. They wanted slaves to work on their fields. And this was also seen by the Pope as a way to expand Christianity. Because initially they were not aware that they have found something so remarkable. Adam Smith लिखते हैं that the accidental discovery of America and the beginning of industrialization are two important episodes which has changed the entire landscape of Europe. यूरोप में सारा बदलाव आ गया इन दोनों चीजों के कारण. 1493 में ये सब जब चल रहा था, 1493 the Pope issued an order known as Papal Bull. He issued an order, a proclamation known as Papal Bull, whereby, लिखिए, whereby the expansion of Christianity was also declared as one of the goals of sea explorations. Was also declared as one of the goals of sea explorations. Sea explorations. At this time, two states were in conflict with each other. They were Spain and Portugal, who were competing to spread their control over these new trade routes. शुरुआत में तो यही दोनों थे. And when news were coming very quickly that we have found this, we have found this. So both the Spanish and the Portuguese king wanted to establish their control over these new trade routes or new discoveries. दोनों लड़ने के लिए तैयार हो गए. Both were ready to go on a war with each other. And then again who had to intervene? Pope. Pope को बीच में आने लगा. And in 1494 a very famous treaty was signed between the two. 1494 में एक treaty sign हुआ. What is that treaty? A treaty of Tordesillas. With the intervention of one of the goals of sea exploration, a treaty of Tordesillas was between the Spanish and the Portuguese. So this treaty of Tordesillas would demarcate the areas of the world between the two. दुनिया को दो भाग में तोड़ देगा. It will break up the world into two parts and it will say that this part आप जाइए, इधर आप जाइए. So what is this treaty of Tordesillas? लिख लिया आपने? Fair enough. A small island, Cape Verde, was chosen as a reference point and 100 nautical miles, 370 nautical miles. इन्होंने मैप पे एक लाइन ड्रॉ किया, ठीक है? And they said that whatever lies or is discovered to the east of it would fall under whose influence? Portuguese. They would fall under the Portuguese. So Portuguese idhar jo karna hai kijiye, because a lot of discovery was happening in this region, and whatever is discovered on this side would belong to the Spanish. Would belong to the Spanish. Fair? So it has demarcated. So आप देखिए पोर्चुगीज इंडिया आते हैं, स्पेनिश मूव टू दिस साइड, and we see that following this clarification, we see a number of settlers began to arrive. Portuguese did not go as settlers, but they as traders in this part. But we see the arrival of Spanish settlers who displaced the native population, captured their land and resources. Because when they arrived in search of slaves, gradually ये पता तो चल ही गया था कि this is not East Indies, this is a new world. धीरे धीरे यहाँ पे Bahamas Island और Caribbean Island are here. So शुरुआत में Spanish arrived here in Caribbean Islands. Yellow color is for Spanish. And then they started moving and capturing territories of all this region. So line लिख लीजिए, arrival of Spanish settlers who displaced the native tribes. Arrival of Spanish settlers who displaced the native tribes, captured their land and resources. Arrival of Spanish settlers who displaced the native tribes, captured their land and resources, and established settlers colony. So you understand what are settlers colony? Established settlers colony. Kaha? Let's see. In North America. In North America, they established their colonies in Mexico, Florida. So this is Florida, this is Mexico. In Central America, the part connecting North and South America is Central America. In Caribbean islands, so apart from slaves, they also found that Caribbean islands, the small islands, यहाँ पे बहुत से islands हैं छोटे छोटे. Caribbean islands are, they were a very conducive ground for the cultivation of which crop? कौन सा crop यहाँ पे होता था? Sugar. Sugar cane cultivation started on a large scale. Cuba, पढ़ते हो? Tobacco. So sugar, tobacco. Because we know that the discovery of New World led to the arrival of crops. A number of new food and cash crops arrived in the different parts of the world. Like you read, food crops like potato, tomato, pineapple, red chili, and cash crops like sugarcane. Sugarcane हमारे यहाँ था पहले, tobacco नहीं था. Portuguese brought tobacco cultivation and then Mughals promoted it because it was in demand and also a very important commodity of trade. Cotton मिलेगा. So Caribbean island में you see tobacco and sugar cultivation. And then in South America आप देखिए, in South America all the states, mainly major states, Venezuela, उरुग्वे, पढ़ते हो? अर्जेंटीना, चिले, एटसेट्रा. एटसेट्रा. देखिए, when these Europeans were arriving, what was the response of the natives? Do you think that they would be happy to see them? खुश होंगे? नहीं. Tribes were definitely not happy to see outsiders. And there was a lot of conflict and violence. So who were these settlers? कौन थे ये लोग? Traders, merchants, peasants, landlords, poor, all type of society. So definitely the crown or the kings helped them with the army and the navy इनसे लड़ने में, to help them to settle. And they were able to overpower these natives not only because they had superior weapons, but they had come up with a secret weapon which they were also not aware of. What is that secret weapon? Disease. एक famous किताब है Guns, Germs and Steel, that Europeans have captured the world on the basis of all these three forces: guns, weapon, germs, disease. अच्छा, disease कैसे है? Because Europe has seen so many epidemics, and after surviving the epidemic, the population had a herd immunity for it. But when they came in a land where these diseases had not occurred, the population was infected and they died. Smallpox, measles. So within 20 years of Christopher Columbus' arrival, we see that many people in many areas, around 80% of the population died because of these diseases. आप खुद सोचिए, अगर हम आप अंडमान जाते हैं आज, and we come in contact with the Jarawa tribe, Onge tribe, वहां पे कोविड नहीं आया था, तो क्या होगा? They will be affected by it. So they were able to capture the land and resources. But suddenly they found that the population started depleting. इससे और फायदा हुआ उनको. And the old dream or the gold dream was realized. जिसलिए वो सपना देख रहे थे वो उनको मिल गया. They found silver mines and gold mines in Mexico, in Venezuela, and more so in Argentina. Discovery of silver mines and gold mines. अर्जेंटीना का नाम ही पड़ा है, अर्जेंटाइन इज एजी, सिल्वर. दे गॉट इट. यहां पे जो लोग थे ना, उनको सोना इतना पता नहीं था. लाइक इफ यू रीड द बुक सेपियंस बाय हरारी, जरूर पढ़िए कभी टाइम मिले, सेपियंस बाय युवल नोआ हरारी. So when the Spanish had arrived in Mexico, they saw that these Aztec people, यहां पर कौन सा population था? So which were the prominent tribes here? यहां पर in this region there were Aztecs. Aztecs. Here you find that there were Mayans. In this region there were Incas. ऐसा नहीं है कि there was no development. There were very prominent tribal kingdoms. But unfortunately these people did not value gold or silver much. उनके लिए लोहा ज्यादा जरूरी था, बिकॉज उससे कुछ काट सकते थे. तो बेवकूफ भी बनाया एस्टेक्स को. एस्टेक्स को बोला वाई आर यू डाइंग, बिकॉज गॉड इज नॉट हैप्पी विथ यू. एस्टेक रूलर को कैप्चर कर लिया हाउस अरेस्ट में. सो ऑल टाइप्स ऑफ ट्रिकरी वाज डन. Do you know there is an Indian connection also with the Aztecs and the Mayans? Aztec, if you see the Aztec tribe, the possible connection of Aztec is with Aztec. Aztecs are a tribe still found in Mexico who are worshippers of snakes. कहा जाता है इन महाभारत आप पढ़ते हैं that when the king Parikshit died, राजा परीक्षित, why did he die? सांप काट लिया था. महाभारत आप ऐसे देख रहे हो. So when Parikshit died because of snake bite, then his son Janmejay did a यज्ञ. बोले पूरे सांप जाति को समाप्त कर देंगे. So many snakes started getting pulled into that fire, dying. सारे सांप मरने लगे. And the only snake that survived was Takshak. वो चला गया इंद्रलोक. And he coiled itself around the throne of Lord Indra. So Lord Indra भी खींचे जाने लगे. तो Lord Indra को अभी स्वाहा होने वाला था. Then he somehow in middle he requested a Brahmin family कि बचाओ जन्मेजय से. So then the Brahmin woman sent her son Astik and Astik convinced Janmejar to stop. उस समय से all those worshippers of Nag or Naga cult worship Astik, and वहीं से आया है connection of Aztec. बहुत कुछ आपको सिमिलर मिलेगा. मायंस का कहानी सुनिए, फिर से महाभारत में आप पढ़ते हो मायासुर था. आई एम नॉट टेलिंग, दिस इज नॉट माइथोलॉजी. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, दिस इज नॉट माइथोलॉजी, दिस इज हिस्टोरिकल फैक्ट. यूरोपियंस ने दुनिया में यह बात कन्विंस कर दिया दैट देयर इज आइसोलेटेड कल्चर. बट आज जब आप वापस पढ़ा जा रहा है, when historical artifacts are being resurrected and studied, then we can find there is so much of connection between our ancient civilization and that of west and east. बहुत कुछ मिलता है. मायासुर की कहानी है that मायासुर after constructing Indraprasth, when he also wanted to become king, he went to Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna said, बहुत बढ़िया काम किया, बताओ क्या चाहिए. He said, I also want to become king. बोले यहां तो नहीं हो पाएगा. Here there is so much of conflict. आपको मैं एक लैंड देता हूं, जाओ उधर. So the followers, and how I am telling you is because in the caves of Central America there are so many relief images where themes from Mahabharata can be found. आप देखिए that there is a mountain also, Trishul mountain here. There are so many names you find correlation. So ये थोड़ा सा मालूम होना चाहिए. अब लिखिए, the discovery of silver mines led to a price revolution in 16th century. Discovery of silver mines led to a price revolution in 16th century. Price revolution, discovery of silver mines, है ना, led to a price revolution in 16th century. अच्छा, प्राइस रेवोल्यूशन क्या है समझिए. प्राइस रेवोल्यूशन का मतलब है दैट, रिमेंबर आई टोल्ड यू दैट देयर वाज सडनली स्कार्सिटी ऑफ करेंसी इन 14th century. But in 14th century, because the population was also weak, so they managed. But after 14th century, फिर से population बढ़ रहा है, and it was very difficult to do barter system over long distance. So 15th century में बड़ा दिक्कत हो रहा था. It was becoming difficult, but somehow they were able to come out of this crisis because of the inflow of a lot of gold and mainly silver. Silver revolution. बहुत पैसा आने लगा. And because of the influx of a lot of liquidity, there was increase in the prices of commodities. This is called as price revolution. Now, my simple question is that, why were the Europeans coming from their country, which was doing well, and settling in a land which is a newly found land? There is a lot of uncertainty. James Clear अपनी किताब Atomic Habits में लिखते हैं that one thing that is common about human beings is that we have not changed even if the civilizational change has happened. जैसा हम पहले सोचते थे, आज भी in many ways we think like, and one of the basic behavior of human being is security. Security. We are inertial, we don't like change. सही बात है. So why did the people leave their land, ठीक है, state is supporting, and settle here in vast number? Can you tell me why? What were the factors which would have been responsible for the arrival of European settlers? अरे गोल्ड नहीं है. गोल्ड तो जा रहा था किसके पास? Gold was being mined and was being transported to where? To the country. राजा ले रहा था गोल्ड. Why were the people coming here? Yes, resources, very good. All types of resources, land, huh? Yes, I'll देखिए, आप सिंपल पढ़ते हो that whenever migration happens, it happens due to two factors, pull and push. पढ़ते हो? Pull means attractive thing in the destination. Push means problems at the source. So what are the pull factors? Pull factors are natural resources. What are the natural resources? Warmer climate, vast cultivable land, trade and commerce. There is a prospect for a lot of trade and commerce. Nahin? There is a prospect for trade and commerce. Then definitely the discovery of mines. So many landlords settled because after the decline of feudalism, the kings who had become powerful, many still were unhappy with the church. They wanted religious freedom. So these are the pull factors. Number of resources were there. Fisheries. Across the coastal belt, there was warmer climate because of Gulf Stream. पढ़ते हो? And in the north, when the Gulf Stream and the Labrador Current used to meet in Newfoundland, fisheries. In extreme north, there was plenty of wood available, lakdi, animal fur. So because of this, and they also moved because there were problems in Europe. Political instability still was there because of wars. Raja फिर लड़ रहे थे आपस में. Many people had later migrated after the end of one of the most devastating war in Europe, that is 30 years war, 1618 to 1648. पढ़ते हैं हम. After that we will read later on Treaty of Westphalia. इंग्लैंड से लोग भागकर आगे ड्यूरिंग इंग्लिश सिविल वॉर 1642 to 1660. सिविल वॉर चल रहा था, समझ रहे, इंटरनल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट. मेनी पुअर पीपल बोले हमको भी ले चलो बाबू. Why? Because they wanted to try out a new life. समझ रहे, many wanted to were in debt. ब्रिटिशर्स बाद में हम देखेंगे because शुरुआत में कौन आए थे? दो, Portuguese and this. Later others will come. So many criminals were also exported by British to the foreign land. So there are many purposes. So initially, guys, we see that who have arrived initially? The Spanish. Then we will see the Portuguese will also arrive. We see the arrival of Portuguese, and they started colonizing Brazil. In Brazil, they started coffee cultivation. Brazil. Now, when this news spread in Europe that the Portuguese and the Spanish are surging ahead, who will also enter into this race? French and the British and the Dutch. ये तीनों आएंगे. All three will enter. So French also came in search of gold. आए थे इसलिए. But unfortunately, they did not find gold. The French did not find gold. They tried, but उनको मिला नहीं. So later we see, लिख लीजिए, arrival of French settlers. Arrival of French settlers. So we see this is French. Arrival of French settlers who established colonies in Caribbean island, Canada से वुड जाता था, एनिमल फर, एंड ऑल्सो द लैंड west of Appalachian Mountains. Appalachian, Appalachian Mountains. Guys, here we have Appalachian Mountains. ठीक है? Here we have Appalachian Mountains. So we see arrival of French who established or colonies in Caribbean islands, Canada, and land west of Appalachian Mountains. And then, guys, we see the arrival of British. British colonies. Again here in the Caribbean islands, land between Caribbean island, land between आराम से लिखिए, land between Appalachian Mountains and Atlantic coast. Between Atlantic coast. अच्छा देखिए what happened? Did you understand? So eventually there were four powers. Who are the four powers? Now we see in North America we have the Spanish, French and the British. In South America we have the Spanish and the Portuguese. And because the Spanish and the Portuguese both were Catholic, so they spread Catholicism. Religious conversions happened, and also the Latin culture. That is why this America is called as Latin America. इसको लैटिन अमेरिका कहते हैं बिकॉज द कैथोलिक कल्चर प्रिवेल्ड. यहां पर मिक्स कल्चर है. Even the Dutch had come for some time, but later they sold off their colonies to the British and they focused on Southeast Asia. Now what happened is that when these people arrived, then in this region, and in this region, we see there was cultivation started of sugar, cotton, यहां पर cotton का cultivation and tobacco. So we see that apart from all that is happening, when these people, many of them were peasants and lords, when they arrived, they saw that there is a huge potential to grow these crops. But the problem is that sugar, cotton and tobacco, all of them require a lot of labor. बहुत workforce की जरूरत है. So where would the workforce come from? क्योंकि यहां के लोग तो मर गए, and the rest who are surviving would not work for them. They are fighting. Sugar plantations here, tobacco plantations here, cotton cultivation started in the British controlled territories, some cotton cultivation in the French controlled territories. Where would the population come from? Africa. So we see that from the coastal Africa, slaves were captured by slave masters. Slave masters means the tribal chiefs or the slave traders, and sold to Europeans. So एक नया ट्रेड शुरू होगा. Which trade? Slave trade, transatlantic slave trade. So we see, what is this? Transatlantic slave trade. So slaves यहां से यहां जाएंगे, and from here what commodities will go to Europe? Everything. Sugar, cotton, tobacco, food crops, silver. So from here to here slaves, from Africa to the New World slaves. Many slaves would die during the sea travel, और जो बच गए उनकी और बुरी हालत, because they have to work for hours, 12 to 18 hours काम कराते थे. So what a tragedy, what a hypocrisy that Europeans are talking about humanism but are denying it to a population. Europeans did not talk about the human rights, welfare, dignity of this section. They treated them as second grade people. Racism was there. And they even denigrated the indigenous people. So two types of black population is there, native and Africans. So from here slaves would go to the New World, and from here a number of crops and silver, all this will go. और इधर से फिर क्या आ रहा है? European settlers. नहीं? So this process of exchange of goods and services and people between Europe, part of Africa and the New World is called as Columbian exchange. This is called as Columbian exchange. What is Columbian exchange? The exchange of goods, people and services between Europe, Africa and the New World. और ये सब कहां पे हो रहा है? Atlantic Ocean. This is called as Columbian exchange. And where all this is happening? Atlantic Ocean. So which part of Europe you will see will progress more? When we started trade and commerce, the trade and commerce was based on which part? This part, Mediterranean Sea. So who was at the ahead? Italy. But gradually the Mediterranean trade will decline. It has declined after it was captured by Ottomans और ये बंद हो गया, कम हो गया. So trade क्या हो रहा है? Trade इधर, and trade is happening via the tip of Africa to the east. So which ocean will become more busy? Atlantic. And which states will move ahead? West European states. Those states which have coast along the Atlantic Ocean will become very, very powerful. And which are the states? आप देख लीजिए, Spain, Portugal, Netherlands, Belgium, France and England. So who are the colonial masters? They are the ones. Do you understand? Shift in balance of power from Italy to Western Europe. So Europe में भी सबसे पहले तरक्की कहां पे आई? Which part of Europe became more powerful, more prominent, more prosperous? Western Europe. So modernity will arrive first where? Western Europe. आज भी देखिए, if you go to Europe, Eastern Europe is backward, Central Europe बीच में है और Western Europe is more advanced, क्योंकि वो पहले ही आगे निकल गए थे. So one of the geographical factors which has also determined the fate of states is whether they have or they don't have access to sea. Russia यहीं तो पीछे पड़ गया. Russia, where did Russia fall behind? Is because despite having a vast land, it did not have direct access to sea. इसलिए हम पढ़ेंगे that one of the elements of Russia's foreign policy is warm water diplomacy. Warm water diplomacy. Why this? So why they were able to surge it? So geography also plays an important role. India हमेशा से blessed रहा है. We had everything. We had coasts in the south or along the west east, and we had fertile land. ठीक है. So अब आपका syllabus कितना है पता है? When you talk about American Revolution, your syllabus is only about this. So give a heading British colonization or British colonies. बोलिए. बाद में नहीं माने. Others said we don't accept. Who is Pope to decide? Especially after Reformation, the influence of the church has declined. So why will they accept what the Pope says? British colonization of एक बार हैंड आउट देना. So do you get time to read your handouts? I assume no. This is a new one. What is the old one then? This is the second class, na? Yes, sir. Obviously every class you will get. It will keep on piling up. It will keep on piling up. So you will always have to maintain discipline, because ये challenge होता है UPSC में. UPSC में the biggest challenge is to maintain consistency and discipline. Why? Because every day you will have so much of content. क्लास में लिख रहे हैं, यहाँ पे पोर्टल पे देखिएगा, फिर कुछ और अपलोड कर दिया. Why? Because the requirement is this. I'll be honest, this examination is about content. तो सिंपल है, क्लास से जाइए. Not only here, in every other subject. First revise your class notes. घर जाइए. आपके साथ सबसे अच्छी बात है कि you are early risers, not by choice but by the nature of the batch. And because you are early risers, so you have a lot of time to study. नहीं, मैं मजाक नहीं कर रहा. On days when I get up early for our class, those are the most productive days of my life. Why? Because I get to start early. इससे अच्छी बात क्या हो सकती है? That in the first 2-3 hours you have completed. So after you go back from the class, any batch, revise your class notes having breakfast for 1 hour. फटाफट पढ़ लो. I will tell you why. Because in class there are so many things that we just say and you hear intently. आप रिवाइज करोगे, आपको याद आ जाएगा. फिर क्या करो, ये मटेरियल देखो. मटेरियल को कवर टू कवर मत पढ़ो. Because if you do that, it may take a lot of time. I will make it more crisp. Don't worry. I will make it more crisp. आप क्या करो? You selectively first see the topics And while revising the class notes, there may be few areas which you are not able to recall as it was said. पहले उसको पढ़ो. Don't read everything, because most of the things we do here in analysis. And then if you have time, then read the rest. Otherwise छोड़ दो. समझ गए? So that is something you have to develop, the art of smart work. Because अगर आप शुरू से बैठ गए पढ़ने, तो हो सकता है आपको ना हो. और अगर इसमें कुछ नया पढ़ा, फॉर एग्जाम्पल इसमें लिखा ना इंपीरियलिज्म कॉलोनियलिज्म, यू फाइंड समथिंग गुड, वहीं पर नोट्स में लिख लो साइड में, इन द मार्जिन जस्ट राइट इन फ्यू कीवर्ड्स और इसको रख दो, हाईलाइट इट, रीड इट, कीप इट, एंड विद इन 10 days ऑल द नोट्स दैट यू आर रीडिंग उसको 2 बार 3 बार रिवाइज कर लो विथ अंडरस्टैंडिंग. आई एम टेलिंग यू इट विल बी इम्प्रिंटेड इन योर माइंड फॉर एवर. उसके बाद आप 4 महीने 5 महीने भी नहीं पढ़ोगे, आपको याद रहेगा. Why? Because while studying you understood it. For example, even after years, I remember my geography very well. I remember economics things. Why? Because पढ़ते वक्त ध्यान दिया था. But you have to revise it on the same day, not 2-3 दिन बाद. उसके बाद आपको जो पढ़ना है पढ़िए. Whatever you have to read, GS, optional, read that. ठीक है. किसी दिन मैं आपको बताऊंगा न्यूज़पेपर कैसे पढ़ते हैं 40 मिनट में. I will tell you. अभी कितना टाइम लगता है? 40 मिनट. वेरी गुड. फिर आप बताइएगा. सो आप बहुत आगे हैं. सो 40 मिनट में आई विल आल्सो डिस्कस हाउ टू राइट गुड आंसर्स. नहीं, मैं आपको बताऊंगा हाउ टू रीड न्यूज़पेपर्स इन 40 मिनट्स. मतलब देखो, अगेन इट इज अ फॉर्म ऑफ सजेशन. ट्रिक नहीं होता है कुछ. देखो ये नॉनसेंस बातें हैं. ट्रिक विक कुछ नहीं होता. देयर आर सिंपल वेज बाय विच यू कैन मैक्सिमाइज योर पोटेंशियल. ट्रिक कुछ नहीं होता. देखो ट्रिक ये सब जो चलता है ना यूट्यूब पे, आज अलग यूनिवर्सिटी चल रही है, व्हाट्सएप पे, यूट्यूब पे नहीं. बट आई विल टेल यू हाउ टू मैक्सिमाइज योर पोटेंशियल विथ रेस्पेक्ट टू न्यूज़पेपर, बिकॉज आई ऑल्सो फेस दिस चैलेंज. मेरे को भी पढ़ना होता है न्यूज़पेपर. फॉर मी इट हैज बिकम अ पार्ट ऑफ अ डेली रिचुअल. बट इफ यू आर स्पेंडिंग अराउंड 1 hour 15 minutes to 1 hour 30 minutes now, it is okay. But by the next 2 months, you should not spend more than 1 hour for newspaper reading, because it will not be possible for you to cover everything. So just remind me in the next class, I'll tell you how to read newspaper. ठीक है, अभी समय नहीं है. Which book to refer for world history? बताइए, समय है. You have books to read. So why are you after books? So first thing that I told you in the first class is that unlearn yourself. Means there will be many areas. मैं आपको एक बात बता रहा हूं, ये सीख लो, दिमाग में रख लो, that there are many parts of syllabus which you will cover on the go. ऐसा होगा that you did not have the time to read, और किसी दिन चलते चलते your friend was discussing, you listened intently to it and it came in mains and you have written a wonderful answer. I'm not saying that it is only the way, but there are multiple ways in which you will cover the syllabus. So first get out of that mindset that you have to read books for everything. You cannot do that. Practically it is not possible within a year. It is possible पंचवर्षीय योजना अगर करें तो. So please be, I can tell you 5 books मैं बता दूंगा. मैं ऑप्शनल में नहीं बताता, आप जीएस में कह रहे हैं. Why? Because the purpose क्या है? To know, analyze and write good answers. That is the purpose why we have come here. Not to, accumulate. Yes, you have to read books, other faculties will tell you, but please, for world history, let us avoid it. You will get a yellow book, I think, in a week or so. You can selectively read. तो सबसे पहले यह बात दिमाग में रख लो that you have come here to become district collector, not book collector. ठीक है? So be honest, and I will tell you, and it is at least for my subject, I can assure you, you don't have to read anything. Everything comes from the class notes, if it has to come. Otherwise, it will come from an area which UPSC has also no idea of. ठीक है? So, British colonization. Give me 2 minutes and we'll wrap up. British colonization of North America. So I think in the handout you can open, and we have maps. And please, without fail, bring the handout in the next class. We'll be using it. Please, without fail, bring it in the next class. देखिए ये मैप दिख रहा है आपको? Is it there? So देखिए हुआ ये, it happened that first came Spanish, then came Portuguese, then came French. British Crown or the British government also wanted their settlers to go and take the opportunity which has just arrived. But unfortunately, or because of some circumstances, also because of the homesickness of the English, they were not able to settle in this part. Because when the Spanish heard that the Britishers and the French are trying to come to this part, they tried to sink their ships, they tried to loot. So there was a lot of conflict that was happening between these European states also. And many times the English would somehow be able to cross the Atlantic Ocean and land somewhere here. But when they found that life to be difficult, because life is not going to be easy initially, so they used to return to their homeland. So the British Crown was also very much troubled by the fact that we are not able to take advantage. Later, after almost a century of struggle, they were able to do this. It started that in 1606, King James I granted a charter or a license. आप कहीं भी लिख लीजिए, to a company known as Virginia Company. Virginia Company. अच्छा, did I tell you about Shekhar Gupta's Cut the Clutter? No. देखिए. Again, it is my suggestion. Always take suggestions as a disclaimer. It may or may not apply to you. So it happened that a few years back, I was also discussing with one of my friends who happens to be a very remarkable teacher in current affairs, that there are so many things opinion based that comes in the news, international relations, domestic politics, economy. So is there any source where at least students can, because visual effect is very important for us. कई बार आप 10 चीज नहीं पढ़ सकते, but आप सुन करके आपको याद रहता है. So that person told me about a very prominent YouTube channel which has been found by, which is established by the former editor-in-chief of Indian Express, Shekhar Gupta. शेखर गुप्ता इंडियन एक्सप्रेस में लिखते थे और उन्होंने ये चैनल शुरू किया था कोविड के समय में, क्योंकि उस समय में यूट्यूब और ऑनलाइन बेस्ड कंजम्पशन ऑफ कंटेंट वाज देयर. एंड देन दैट चैनल बिकेम सो पॉपुलर कि उन्होंने कहा कि आई विल डेडिकेट माय चैनल आल्सो टू द यूपीएससी एस्पिरेंट्स. वो कई बार कहते हैं. एंड द नेम ऑफ द चैनल इज कट द क्लटर. सुना है? हाँ, द प्रिंट का ही है, उन्होंने किया है. हाँ, सेगमेंट इज कट द क्लटर. आप यूट्यूब पे गूगल करना कट द क्लटर एंड यू वुड फाइंड रिमार्केबल एनालिसिस ऑन एनीथिंग that you see. Iran-Israel dispute, what is the origin, in what way it is headed, the dynamics of electoral reforms. तो मैं आपको एक सजेशन देता हूं, ये आदत बना लीजिए, वीक में 2 घंटे, 1 घंटे, you will see that he uploads video every 4-5 days of 30 minutes. While you are having dinner, you can just turn on and you can listen to him, and then after that you can make a synopsis of it. Excellent. अभी से आप करोगे ना, in the next 2-3 months, I tell this to all the batches in the beginning, that in the next 3-4 months you will have a very good balanced content, not biased, on anything international relations, because he has an entire team, research team. So instead of reading, you can see on the go भी आप travel कर रहे हो कहीं पे, डाउनलोड कर लिया in your phone and you are listening. And जब आपके पास टाइम है, आप लिख लिया 4 कंटेंट. So these are some of the ways, I will keep telling. These are some of the ways by which you can update and enrich your content. Excellent. I would suggest that you should follow him diligently. Instead of following many people, just follow one. Still very balanced in all these years, and he will continue to do so because he has an entire team that works. You can avoid the political issues because we don't have to get into political waters for now. Fine. Yes, the print का ही है, cut the clutter आप गूगल करोगे आपको मिल जाएगा. So we see that King James the First granted license to Virginia Company, and this company established the first colony in 1607, Jamestown. नाम ही आप समझ में आ ही रहा है. After the king, they would have named it. Here is Jamestown. Jamestown. And over the next 100 years, they controlled all the land. You can see they controlled all the land. And which mountain is here? Appalachian. बताया था आपको? They controlled all the land east of Appalachian. And in the land east of Appalachian, how many colonies were formed? 13 colonies. They formed 13 colonies. मतलब जब वो आए, when they came, the land was one, but for administrative convenience, they divided into 13 parts. समझ गए? So they created how many colonies? 13 colonies. So in the next class, please bring the handout. Without fail, we will understand the nature of it and why the settlers who were initially very happy with the crown supporting them were taking advantage of it. Why were they fed up and they wanted to free themselves, leading to the American Revolution. Fine? Okay. Thank you.